of entrepreneurship, creative destruction versus the discovery compounding process. Can anyone give us an explanation of either the discovery process or the creative destruction process? We give examples of what has happened in the past in the real world. So creative destruction shouldn't be too hard to imagine because it's sort of in the name. Can someone give me an example of when a new industry, a new product, or a new production method replaced the old method of doing things? Yeah, that's an example of this new technology, streaming, replacing the old method of doing things, of mailing out DVDs, which you can still do from Netflix, by the way. Yeah, if they don't have the movie online, you can order the DVD be sent to your house.
How much is it?
I don't know if it's covered in your Netflix subscription or if it's extra money. I don't pay for Netflix. My roommate's friend has Netflix. Does anyone actually pay for Netflix? Or does everyone just have a friend or family member that does? You do? Yeah, so the basic idea of creative destruction is that this new industry comes and replaces the old industry. It puts it out of business, so to speak. Once they invented automobiles, they became viable, people didn't ride horses anymore. So it destroyed all the old industries involved with that. Creative destruction is great, especially for consumers, because we get these brand new products. We get these much better products than before. But at the same time, it hurts those old industries and people that worked in the old industries. On the other hand, there's the discovery process. And this, in the compounding discovery process, one invention, one entrepreneurial idea builds on top of older ideas. So back in the 90s and 2000s, companies were incorporating the internet and computers into their stores, into their regular selling process, and they were able to use these new things to become more efficient. So instead of putting the old ones out of business, think of Walmart. Walmart now sells online. You can order your stuff online and go to the store and pick it up. That's a way that they use the internet to make their company, make their product even better, even more convenient. This is a much easier process or I guess there's fewer side effects because you don't throw people out of work from it. You don't destroy industries entirely.
For it to be creative destruction, do you have to not necessarily completely shut down an industry, but would Uber and Lyft be considered creative destruction?
Because of what they've done to the typical taxi industry?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good example of that. Because they use a totally new technology. Well, not totally new, but new in ride sharing. They have the app that matches you to someone instead of standing on the street corner with your hand up, waiting for a taxi to drive by. They changed the way that that ride sharing is done, and the taxi industry has suffered because of it. And as soon as old people figure out how taxis or how Ubers work, then taxis will go completely out of business. It will be funny to see older people in DC coming to visit that hadn't really been to big cities that often, unable to figure out how to use Uber on the street corner, so they're just trying to find a taxi. But every single young person is just on their phone, standing there waiting for their Uber to show up. So anytime there's an opportunity to improve human welfare, anytime there's a way, a new invention we could do, a new way of doing something, it's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to discover that and to use it for themselves to make a profit. So, whoever invented Uber they figured out a way to, oh, we don't need to spend all this time training taxi drivers, to know the city. They don't have to take all these tests. We can give them a GPS and they'll know exactly where to go. And we can use an app to match people to that driver, so they don't have to just drive around in circles, wasting all that gas. They found a new way to make things more convenient for people, and because of that, they were able to profit. So when there's a market failure, when the market fails to improve people's lives as much as it could, that's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to innovate and profit, or there's a reason for government intervention to step in and to correct that market failure. In some cases, the problem to solve is appears to be too difficult, or maybe it takes too much money, and it's better for the government to step in and to make that correction. Other times, other times, it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity, but other times it'll be much better for an entrepreneur to step in and to solve that problem. So this was a slide from the textbook. I really liked it because of what Henry Ford said. If I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Often consumers don't even know what they want. They don't know what the next good thing is. If they knew, if they had that idea, they would be the entrepreneur themselves. So one of the things that entrepreneurs do is come up with this entirely new product, or a new service that fills needs that people didn't realize that they had. There's a lot of risk involved with that, to try to anticipate a future need, or a need that doesn't exist yet. So it's incredibly risky. And that's why we see a lot of startups fail. I don't know the stats, but a ton of startups fail because they can't quite capture that consumer demand. You can go back through all the products that I saw one the other day. I forgot to put it in the slideshow. There was a tweet that from Reddit when the iPad first came out, and they were just ripping into it. No one's gonna want an iPad. It's just a big iPhone, but you can't make phone calls on it. And then there's a series of tweets underneath it of people high up in the tech industry who did a really good job, especially in the past, of predicting consumer trends, just straight up talking shit on the iPad. And they've sold tens of millions of iPads in the United States. It's been an incredibly successful product over the years. But even people that knew a lot about the industry could not anticipate how people would use it and how many people wanted to use it. And if you know the history of Apple, especially early on, Apple had some really bad misses. So it is even the best struggle to come up with the next thing and to see what future consumers are gonna, what they need. So here's some examples that they gave. Again, the textbook gave for products that were invented by entrepreneurs. Air conditioning, airplane, automobile. These are a lot less fun than talking about the new tech ones. Okay, I think that slide's coming later on. I have a slide of a bunch of failed products that we can laugh about. So the goal of the market and its function is to maximize human material well-being. Obviously, we're not talking about people's spiritual or emotional well-being, but the market helps you get all the goods and services that you need. That's the goal of what we're doing. And the market is a process. So it's the process of buying and selling, of consumers weighing the different products that they could buy, weighing their alternatives and choosing what they think best meets their needs, and for businesses to determine what goods to produce, how to produce them, to try to meet those needs of the consumers. And we're going to do some exercises later of a market, putting together supply and demand curves, so looking at consumers and producers. And it's going to be fairly static. But I want you to remember that even while we're doing that, keep in the back of your mind that this is the outcome of thousands or millions of people acting. It's not just one, like consumers like in a blob, producers in a blob, all acting like in unison together. There tends to be a lot of focus on static analysis. I'm sure that's what most of your Econ 101 class was. That's what a lot of textbooks do. I guess that's the easiest way to teach it. So I want to try to get away from that, because it's much more interesting to look at all the individual decision making that's going on. So the optimal allocation of resources, so the best way to combine everything we have, the best way to produce all the goods, the most efficient way. It's constantly changing based on how people's needs develop, how their wants change, how we have new ideas to produce things, new products to create. They're constantly changing, and they emerge from the market process. We discover the best way to put these together based on what people are willing and able to pay. It emerges from entrepreneurial successes and failures. So those new companies that break out and have these great products that people love, or the ones that have products that people don't love so much. That turns out they think it's a great idea, or maybe you hear about it and you invest in it, toss some money in because you think it's going to be great, and it turns out the fail people just really don't want it. There's a profit and loss that firms face. Firms that meet consumers' needs will end up profiting. They'll sell a lot of those goods. While at the same time, firms that don't provide goods that people want are going to suffer losses. And because it's not a charity and there's not money constantly streaming in, those firms will be forced to either adapt to successful strategies, or will be forced to go out of business, and someone else can use those resources to provide consumers the value, that they really want. And there's constantly new ideas and new knowledge to solve the problems. So when we talk about equilibrium later on, where the quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded, that's a snapshot of a moment in time. We're constantly moving towards equilibrium, but we're very rarely actually in that position because there's always new things happening. So, for an example, let's look at Valentine's Day. Roses are a very common gift to give on Valentine's Day, I've been told. But in Loretto, in the winter, they don't exactly grow very well. So if you live in Loretto and you want to buy someone roses for Valentine's Day, you have to get them from somewhere else. Now there's going to be a high price on Valentine's Day right before Valentine's Day, because there's very few roses in the area. In January, people are buying a lot of roses to get people. In March, the same thing. But right around Valentine's Day, the price is going to increase as a lot more people want them. So of course, it's annoying, right? That the one time you want it, the price is going to be more expensive. But what this does is it transmits knowledge to the producers of roses to increase their production of roses and to ship more to areas where they can't naturally grow. So these higher prices encourage, I don't know if there's flower companies or if it's just independent farmers that grow them and ship them to the places that sell flowers. I don't know the flower industry very well. Does anyone? I didn't think so. All right. But these higher prices encourage them to increase the supply of flowers, of roses, on Valentine's Day, or right before Valentine's Day. So while it's annoying, this price increase is an incentive to move more flowers, increase the quantity in the market, so people can get all the flowers they want, and ends up not increasing the price very much. Because first you increase the demand, then you increase the supply. We'll talk about how this works later, but right now what I want you to focus on is the fact that the price here is acting as a signal, and it incentivizes the flower producers, the rose producers, to grow more for this time of year. Okay, so profit and loss. Profit, like the accounting definition, is it's the revenue minus the cost of production. But in terms of economics, we can think of it as evidence that consumers are receiving value from the good or service. That it's worth more to consumers than the cost of producing it. So their firms get a profit from it. Now what it does is it encourages more production within the firm that, that created that product, and then for other firms to offer more products, to offer similar products, to try to capture that, to meet that consumer need as well. So I think a really good example of this is the hard seltzers that got really popular last summer. I think it was either Truly or White Claw that was like the first one. Apparently they've been out for a while, but somehow out of nowhere they blew up last summer. And then before you know it, everyone is offering a new hard seltzer. Natty Light came out over the summer and they made a big deal about their seltzer. Four Loko came out with one. Bud Light, this is coming soon, but they actually just came out a couple weeks ago. And then the whole White Claw thing turned into a meme, which is awesome. Another thing that's interesting about this, and a good example, is that, well, first, like White Claws and Trulies, they're like the same alcohol content, same basic flavors, same sweetness. When you get like the Natty Seltzers, which is a little bit sweeter. There's more sugar in it. You get the Bud Light Seltzer, which has less sugar than like White Claws and Trulies. Tastes a lot more like the seltzer water. You get the Four Locos, which is a lot stronger. It's like triple the alcohol content, and it's also like crazy sugary. Actually just tastes exactly the same as the old Four Locos. So while they're all moving in that direction in the market, all these producers are now creating hard seltzers that never sold them in the past. They're offering them like slightly different ones to see if there's a little bit different way to meet consumer needs. Here we go. All right. Well, this thing, loss, when firms suffer loss, it has the opposite effect. So again, from an accounting standpoint, it's just a firm earning a negative profit. In this case, the revenue that they make from selling the product does not cover the cost of production. So if this persists over time, it discourages firms from selling that good or the service. Obviously because they're losing money. They have a hard budget constraint and they can't keep losing money indefinitely. So it redirects those resources that they're using in production to other goods or services that consumers value more. That better usage, that other product that consumers want more, that'll result in a profit. Whether it's this firm that does it, they correct their mistake and offer something better, or if they go bankrupt, someone else buys the assets, another company, and uses them to produce something that people actually want. So while this process is painful, it's basically the same as the creative destruction we talked about earlier, it helps people get more of what they actually need. So in the long run, even in like the medium run, it's much better for the economy than having these old inefficient industries persist, providing goods or services that people don't really want. So I have a couple pictures up here of failed products from the past. The first is the Ford Edsel. Have any of you guys heard of that? Unless there's any car people in here. Back in like the 50s, cars were huge. They were like boats. And the Ford Edsel was like the biggest of the big. But people thought even back then that it was really ugly. No one wanted it, and actually ushered in like the first compact car like craze. People started buying really small cars as a result of how terrible this car was. I think Ford sold it for like a year and a half until they just completely stopped producing it. You guys have heard of New Coke though, right? Like back in the 80s, they tried to change their recipe to taste more like Pepsi because they kept losing out in the blind taste test to Pepsi. But everyone hated New Coke and made fun of it, and they had to go back soon.
Don't you think that'd be a marketing trick though?
The New Coke?
Yeah. Make them think, oh man, this is terrible. Now we've got to go back to normal Coke so more people will buy it.
I can see that happening today. I don't know if I can see that happening back in 1980. Advertising was a lot more traditional back then. But this is not a bad tactic. It's like, oh, really? You want something different? Give them something different, and they see they don't want it. Yeah, before very long, Coke went back to the classic Coke, and that's what they sell now. Not the original Coke with the cocaine in it. I guess Coke 2.0 with the cocaine removed. The next one you can't really see. I couldn't find a good picture of that. It was Lay's Wow chips. They had a lower fat content in them because they had larger, I guess, molecules of fat. I don't know enough science behind this. I do know something about it was like larger molecules, so the body wouldn't absorb the fat. Well, so the effect it had on the body was you couldn't digest it, so it moved straight through.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So it acted like a laxative.
Oh wow.
So I guess they didn't do enough product testing before that to find out the effect it had on people. So yeah, after it gave people, I'll say, upset stomachs for a while, people didn't buy it, and they had to completely get rid of the Wow chips.
I feel like you hire food scientists for that reason.
Yeah, you should know if it's going to cause diarrhea in everyone that eats it. What's this last one? Oh, it was a Samsung Galaxy, the one that used to explode and catch on fire from a couple years ago. Obviously, when you have that sort of problem, people aren't going to buy the product. So you've got to either redesign it and make it safer, or just abandon that product completely and just go to a new model of phone. You guys remember what model that was?
It was the Note 7.
7.
That phone completely changed how electronics are shipped.
Really?
Also, yeah. I work at a UPS store, and it's always when they talk about something, anything, it was because of the Note 7.
Well, that's a great example of how one mistake or one poor product changes things. And the market moves in a new direction. They do something different. So in this case, they have to, or people catch on fire.
What happened to it? Why did it blow up? The batteries, there was a problem with them and it kept exploding. Because
randomly?
Well, yeah, pretty much. But it's all about the chemical imbalance inside the battery. It exploded.
Did it have to do with the shipping, or was it just a bad battery?
The thing is, a couple people had them explode on planes. So if they had loads exploding on planes, they had to be more careful with lithium-ion batteries in general when it comes to shipping.
Yeah, because the last place you want an explosion is when you're up thousands of feet in the air. You guys have any funny examples of shitty products that failed? Well, if something comes to you, then just bring it up later. Just interrupt whatever we're talking about. Well, put your hand up, don't just yell. We can change the subject. It's always entertaining to look at these terrible products that came out. But what these do is they provide a lot of knowledge to entrepreneurs and to firms of what people don't want, which is just as valuable as figuring out what people do want. It helps give them knowledge of what products to design, what people are looking for in these products, what ways to provide them more value. Because again, if you can align people's incentives where firms are made better off by providing people things that make them better off, then you can harness people's inherent self-interest to make society better off. So as long as institutions encourage that, so a free market with private property rights that have strong legal protections for if people get hurt by products or negligence by producers, you tend to see when firms becoming better off by making their consumers better off. So profit provides the incentives for reallocating resources to their highest valued uses. It encourages discovery of new opportunities for the most useful employment of these scarce resources. Because there's only so many resources we have to use them in the most efficient way possible if we want to make ourselves better off. Because of the hard budget constraint, when firms lose money, they can't do that indefinitely. They can only do it for so long until they run out of money. So they're forced to act like the firms that are successful, to offer similar products or produce them in similar, like, low-cost ways. So right now, there's a lot of existing opportunities for profit, a lot of ways for firms or entrepreneurs to make more money, but they ignore these ideas, not because they don't want to make more money, but because they don't have the knowledge either to diagnose what that need is or how to do it, or they lack the knowledge actually of how to achieve that goal. You guys think of problems that we have out there that we haven't figured out how to solve yet? That a smart entrepreneur could come around and fix for us. We create a lot of waste. If someone could figure out a way to compact, I don't know, tons and tons of trash in a little square, that'd make us a lot better off. We'd waste a lot less land on landfills.
But wouldn't that bring up a new problem of almost us reverting back and wasting more because we have more land?
Because there's a lower cost of wasting stuff, of throwing stuff out, we'd waste more.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a possibility.
That's a problem with global warming.
So I like the way you're thinking of incentives. It feels relatively less costly, so now we create more waste. That's a potential problem. Any other ideas for entrepreneurs to solve? Yeah, if you could figure out a way to cure cancer.
I feel like that's hard for an entrepreneur to solve, though, because that's just hard to do.
That's less of an entrepreneur and more of a scientist. But there's a decent number of scientists out there that work, say, for the National Institute of Health or something, or they work for a university, and they make a discovery, and they go to investors and say hey, I've got this. Can you run a company and bring it to market? Or they just sell it to, I don't know, Covidian or some other medical firm. Along with global warming, a new source of energy, more renewable energy. Wind and solar aren't that great yet. So either finding out new ways to harness them, lower cost batteries for solar to store the energy, because obviously it's not always sunny. Or was it Aston Martin? Some car company said in the next 5 or 6 years they want to create use nuclear energy in their cars. You guys see that? Yeah, what happens to a car accident? Are they going to explode like a nuclear bomb? Or? That would be a great, more fuel efficiency is what a lot of people are after. So that would be a great problem to solve. But again, that may create new problems. And maybe that's why it's not viable, or one of the reasons why it's not viable. Because think how many cars are out there. It's all those nuclear bombs driving around. So knowledge is discovered and then acted upon. So we listed some of these problems. Maybe an entrepreneur figures out a way to solve one of these problems, or at least to make it to better, alleviate the problem a little bit. So they figure that out and then they act upon it. I want you to remember that it's costly to acquire this information. To figure out how to do these things takes a lot of time. To convince other people that this solution is right, to get investors for your product, takes time. So it's not something that's easy to do. I think that's pretty intuitive for us that it's not easy to create inventions, or else we'd all be entrepreneurs inventing new things. So despite the shortcomings in the market, despite the lack of perfect information, the shortcomings in getting us to the optimal allocation of resources and the best situation for consumers, the market still generates the optimal outcomes. It's the best scenario we have given the lack of knowledge that persists, because it encourages more knowledge to be generated by entrepreneurs seeking profits, by trying to discover new ways to help consumers. This generates knowledge, and this encourages them to go after it more and more because they can succeed by helping other people. So the profit and loss mechanism forces individuals to behave as if they are trying to maximize their profits, even if that's not their goal. Obviously, firms must earn a profit to stay in business, or at least break even. They can't lose money indefinitely. So people make business decisions for many reasons. It can be, they can just be guessing. They could do a ton of market research. They could think they have great ideas. I had a couple of dumb examples in here. I don't know what's that. Could be pure luck. They can make it for any sort of reason. They could think they have like all this knowledge of why they make a decision. They could be totally wrong for the reason why, but they could still be right if people want that. No matter what reason they choose to like create these products, if people want them, they'll buy them and the firm will be successful. It'll encourage them to produce more of that. And it'll encourage other firms to produce similar products or produce, in the same like new production method. So the market ends up rewarding these good decisions no matter why they're made, even if it's for the worst possible reason. They'll reward the good decisions that meet consumer needs, and they'll punish the ones that don't meet consumer needs. So entrepreneurs and all firms, they learn from this and they adapt to successful strategies. So even if a firm, if their goal is to just, their main goal is to be like a good steward in the community, and they're going to provide some products that they think are like good for people, because of the hard budget constraint, they're going to be forced to adapt to the successful strategies. So maybe their main goal is just to provide good products, but they're also forced to do it at like the lowest cost possible. So they adopt a new production method that another firm does to produce it at a lower cost, even though that's not their goal, just so they could stay in business. So now they're providing these good products to people, but they're doing it at a low cost, just like the other successful firms. It could be pure luck that they're just throwing darts at a dartboard and that's what they're going to make. And if, the dart lands on products that people want, they're going to be encouraged to make more of those products. So to basically summarize the market process, the market generates a bunch of alternatives, a bunch of different products out there, or different ways to produce the products. And then includes a criteria for judging those alternatives. That's the profit and loss. Whether consumers think it meets their needs and goes out and buys it. So it incentivizes the continuation of successful alternatives. It incentivizes people to make those good products, firms to make those good products that consumers want. And it eliminates the failed alternatives. It eliminates the Ford Edsels and the Lay's Wow chips that gives everyone diarrhea. And a hard budget constraint forces the underperforming firms out of the market, or to be, to alter their products so they're copying the successful firms. So in the long run, we have creative destruction with new products, ideas, and firms destroying the old ones. And then we also have the compounding discovery, where these inventions build on top of each other. It can be a painful process, especially the creative destruction part, but in the long run, it's best for society. All right, so let's stop here and take a break. We're halfway through class. We have the seating chart thing. I don't want to forget that. So I'll take a break and get a question from this side of the room, and then from that side of the room.
think the fidget spinner was like a failure, or do you think it was like a successful product?
It was successful, wasn't it? They
Like,
were
I feel like
everywhere.
everybody had one, and then now like nobody uses them. I don't know.
I feel like the market was for like kids that like can't concentrate,
Yeah.
and then it just blew up where like everyone, like college kids, are just like playing
Yeah.
with them.
But like I see no one with them now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Because they definitely, I'm sure they still do a very good job selling to like, the little kids that need them.
Like when it became like a meme, everybody. like,
Yeah,
wanted
everyone
one,
had one.
And every store everywhere sold it. So, but now I just feel like nobody has them. So
That's tough. Would you guys say it's a failure or a success?
I feel like it was a success, but like
Is the original company like still like,
I don't know.
did they just make fidget spinners or they make other stuff? I know like
I
no,
feel
What
like
was
no.
bunch-
the original company?
Yeah, I don't even know. There's so many different kinds. Like every company was like, yeah, I'll make a fidget spinner.
The fidget spinner itself wasn't patented, so anyone could make it.
Oh, really?
Because the person who had the patent lost it and then it became popular.
Well, when you Google fidget spinner, the first thing that comes up is digital fidget spinner.
Digital fidget spinner?
So,
Yeah, that's tough. They were almost too successful.
It was just a product of 2017.
Yeah, it was really popular.
Was it that old? 2017?
2017, 2018.
Wow. It's like the whole pet rock fad. Comes in really big for a year and then dies.
Yeah.
It just becomes like a joke. I guess I'll say they were successful, to answer your question. But like, yeah, like once they saturated the market and like the meme died, like,
That's it.
yeah, like the market dried up. I don't think they ever expected it to get that big though.
No,
No.
no way.
All right, how about you guys over here? This is just a chance to like, turn off our brains for a couple seconds. Because people can't pay attention for more than like 15 minutes at a time. We naturally zone out. So I feel like an hour and 15-minute class, at least break it up like halfway through. Or we can just like relax and recharge or whatever. Plus it's only so long I can talk for.
Wikipedia is saying that part of the downfall of the fidget spinner is due to schools banning them.
Okay.
So I think we all forgot that they were literally banned everywhere.
Okay, yeah, that would definitely hurt the market for fidget spinners.
How did it banned?
Because people would rather pay attention to their fidget spinner than otherwise.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you can imagine kids just going crazy with them.
Yeah, it'd be annoying.
One in each hand.
I think it's interesting how memes affect like the market. I feel like
That would
there
be
should
such an interesting like
Yeah.
study. I don't know if you could.
I feel like there should be a class at St. Francis that you could take about like memes and market. 'Cause you
I mean,
know
no
for-
offense to Dean Private. Do you think he knows what a meme is?
I don't know.
Like, I don't know if anyone could teach that class.
Like you can't deny that like it definitely has some sort of impact.
It has a huge impact.
I just think it's interesting.
I mean, all the White Claws memes made me drink that over like the other hard seltzers. Like, it impacted what I bought.
Yeah. Or like the Flex Seal. You know, like all the Flex Seal. It's like I wonder how their product, took off.
Yeah. I'm sure back in the day, Billy Mays selling OxyClean made a lot more people buy it than if someone else was doing it.
Yeah.
You guys have anything? I'm gonna put you on the spot because last time you didn't ask a question either.
Apparently Richard Burr of North Carolina, a senator, was handing out fidget spinners during the impeachment trials.
Did he just find out about fidget spinners?
I don't know, but this is what NBC is saying.
We just do this the rest of the class. We'll be like experts in the fidget spinner market.
Well, it's a violation of Senate rules, so they couldn't have it.
Does it say what the rule is in the Senate?
No, it just says.
'Cause there's no way in hell they said no fidget spinners. I don't think like James Madison said that one. I know the Senate has some weird rules. You guys have anything? This is part of like class participation, so like it helps you like if you ask like these dumbass questions. Not that yours is a dumbass question. It was good. It wasn't as exciting as the previous weekend. I didn't go anywhere special. Okay, this was article from like a year ago now. 20 minutes. All right. It was called "Capitalism's Tough Love: The Real Lessons from the Fall of Sears and GE." I will find this article. I printed it out last year for like class, and I didn't like save like a link to it or anything, but I'll put it on Canvas for you guys. There's a good example of like an article to like use for your real world assignment. Because it talks about business and then stuff in this class, and it's basically like GE is a super old company. Like, yeah, it was founded by Edison. They revolutionized the world of appliances for the home, which were like unheard of back then. But they grew and grew over time. They became super bloated with all these lines of business that wasn't related to their core mission. They thought if you had like good managers, they could manage anything. Kind of like in The Office, when they bring in the new manager to replace Ryan eventually. Charles, and he comes from like a steel company. Michael gets all pissed off because he's not from the paper industry. That actually kind of has some truth here. Managers had no idea about the industries that they were like overseeing from these like companies GE was buying. They didn't have the sort of expertise to know what their consumers wanted and what the best way of going about producing and selling these goods was. So they ended up becoming too bloated and not being successful. They're actually they're part of one of the stock exchanges for the week. Oh, Dow Jones. They're one of the original firms on the Dow Jones, and they were the last one to get pulled off the Dow Jones because of how far their stock fell. And the other example from the article is Sears. They went bankrupt in October 2018. Back when they were founded, they were like the Amazon of the time. They disrupted the industry. Back then it was just general stores in like each town. So you had like one place to go to buy your stuff. So like Loretto going to Smith Myers, that was it. So Sears would send out catalogs across the country to people in all these towns, and they could order whatever they wanted, cheaper than they could from the general store, which was revolutionary for the time. It's like laughable now, but it was revolutionary. Then they were able to rebrand and remake their company once the country started to urbanize, like the early 1900s, and they created all these large brick and mortar stores that sold everything, which is really tough for a company to do, to completely change how they operate. But Sears was able to do that. And they were, again, one of the most successful firms of like the large brick and mortar stores. But as buying over the internet became popular, Sears was unable to adapt to that. They were unable to compete. And then they had like stores like Walmart that sold their stuff cheaper, that they were unable to compete with. Yeah, there's something. Okay. So as the consumer demands changed, and there were new products invented and new ways of selling these products, firms must adapt if they want to survive. In this case, Sears originally was able to adapt but they weren't able to adapt a second time. GE had either copied or invented a lot of different products over time, but eventually they became too bloated and they weren't able to keep up with the changing economy. Both companies had amazing profits for, decades and decades. And that rewarded them over time, and that's one of the reasons why Sears had so many stores, why they bought Kmart, why GE became so large and they bought so many other other firms to create like a giant conglomerate. But eventually they suffered losses. Again, Sears went bankrupt. GE's stock went from like $30 a share to down to $9 a share over like 10 years. But that's a pretty big drop for a firm. So as an example of creative destruction of two firms that were substantially harmed, especially Sears, substantially harmed by changing industry. GE, you could say from like poor management, just, entrepreneur being wrong. So the article does ask the question, what should firms do with their profits in the short run, knowing that over time, the firm's naturally going to struggle eventually as things change. Do they return that to their shareholders? Do I don't know, higher dividends or stock splits? Or do they try to pump a bunch of money into research and development? Do they just pay themselves? If you guys are running a firm, how would you, and you're really successful for a time, but they can't last forever, how do you, what do you do with the money in the meantime? Knowing it may not last forever.
Do you invest in your entrepreneurs? Your people in the company that are maybe have an idea that could benefit your company and kind of have an incentive to keep them with your company rather than having them go out and do their own thing.
So pay talent to keep potential entrepreneurs around. How many times have a company's biggest competitor end up being someone who left because they couldn't do what they wanted?
That all Home Depot is?
I'm pretty sure that's Home Depot. That's all the car companies, the guy who started Lincoln worked for Ford. Lamborghini was one. They couldn't do what they wanted in that company, so they left and started their own. And they were entrepreneurs and they were successful, and they either bought the old company or they got bought out by the old company because they were too good of a competitor. So I think that's a great idea to keep your talent, and especially you said entrepreneurs, people who are going to be entrepreneurs, keep them inside. It's tough for a firm like GE that's so large to keep to allow people to be entrepreneurs, because you end up getting more and more bureaucratic as it gets larger and larger, because it's more difficult to monitor everyone.
More red tape.
Yeah. My mom's company, she worked for St. Jude Medical, a medical device firm, and they got bought by Abbott Laboratories. Abbott Laboratories is huge. As you said, the amount of bureaucracy that you get, that just you have to follow a procedure, you must fill out these forms, in a larger company is insane, the difference. So I think that's a good idea. And also trying to keep a culture of entrepreneurship within the organization. Some large firms are able to do it. 3M. It's mining, manufacturing. Anyone know what the name is? I know Fry and Econ talk about it a lot.
Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing.
Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. The guy who invented the sticky note, he was trying to create a stronger epoxy and messed up, and it was a weaker epoxy. So he just put it on some paper and stuck it up on his desk, to make his own sticky notes, because they weren't a thing yet. And someone saw them in the company, was hey, this is a great idea, we should sell these. So encouraging people to take that initiative and say, hey, that's a really good idea. Or I came up with a really good idea.
That's what made me think of it, because that's all Tonkin talked about in 101.
Any other ideas for how to keep your company, what to do with those profits while you're successful? You think,
I would say research and
yeah, especially if you're like GE, research and development is a great idea. I mean, that goes along with entrepreneurship, or I guess entrepreneurship, but you know the market's going to move, so try to figure out the next best thing. What if you're like Sears? How do you do like research and development if you're like, I don't know, more service?
Maybe like do research for behavior trends in the market and figure out what like marketing is working and what products have higher sell points, and figuring out how to like restructure like the inside of your store to make it more convenient for the customer.
I like that, more market analysis to see, try to see where things are going.
Did Target do that? Like to make it like easier for like customer to go through their store. Like I feel like
That sounds familiar.
They like did a bunch of studies with like families and had them go through and like did like clothing and then food and then like that's why Targets are set up the way they're set up.
That sounds familiar. I can't guarantee, but it sounds right. They did? I know, like grocery stores are super like, they designed them like hardcore for like, do all those studies to figure out. They put like all the needs in like different corners, so you're forced to go through the entire store.
Something I noticed, like the Walmart in Evansburg and the Walmart in Altoona is like the same setup except it's flip-flop.
Yeah.
So like you would go, oh, freezer aisles over here in Evansburg, but the freezer aisle over here is in Altoona. I just thought that was interesting. I wonder if they do that on purpose. Like they'd have to.
Yeah, I don't understand why it's flipped though. Is it?
Just to
Just
confuse
to,
people.
Yeah, confuse people
like-
so they end up wandering
Yeah,
around more.
Exactly.
But everything else is still the same, like just
I
mirroring.
think so, yeah.
Because it really is.
Yeah.
Any other ideas? All right. Oh, this is the last slide for today. The legal basis of a successful market system. So in a free market, you don't have the government restricting how firms produce or telling them how to produce, and how to sell goods, what resources they need to use to produce those goods. It's all left up to the individual firms. Someone in favor of central planning would say it's more chaotic. You see creative instructions, you see firms fail, some firms do very well, but it's how they figure out the best way to produce resources. However, even those that want the government completely out of the market, they want full markets, determining everything. You still need the government to provide a sound legal environment. So if people can't be sure that they're not going to get cheated by producers, they're not going to be willing to buy from those producers. I mean, my buddy, when he was going to go to the Titans-Chiefs game a couple weeks ago, he found tickets on Craigslist.
So did you go to the Super Bowl or not?
He was this close to buying because they were such a good deal, but he's like, no, I'm going to get scammed. So if you can't be sure that you're going to get the goods and services you want, and that they're going to be the quality that you expect, that they're not going to like hurt you, something, you're going to be a lot less willing to engage in those transactions. He smartly didn't buy the $100 tickets on Craigslist that were going for like $500 on like StubHub. A big thing for the legal environment is the protection of private property. So if criminals can come in and take your wages or the profits you make from your business, they can take your house or I don't know, all the stuff out of your company. There's little incentive to work hard. It's the idea, for those of you that have had a philosophy class, Thomas Hobbes is like Hobbesian jungle, where it's like man versus man, and it's just basically the idea of like cavemen all fighting each other, taking their sticks and stones from each other. There's no incentive to work hard and to like create any sort of wealth because it's just going to get taken away from you, or you're going to spend it all trying to defend yourself from people taking it away. You heard like stories about buried treasure? If you read The Wealth of Nations, in one of the chapters, Adam Smith says all the buried treasure in England could pay off like their national debt at the time. Because apparently it was a real thing of like during like the medieval ages, the rich, I don't know, landowners, the feudal owners would bury their wealth, like literally like their gold and silver, in the ground on their estates, so that people wouldn't come in and steal it from them. Which I thought like pirates would do that or something like that. I didn't think that was like a real like common practice. Apparently, it's a very common practice in England in order to keep their wealth. And also, like castles are military fortifications. Like they'd waste all this money building giant forts to protect their stuff. Obviously, this is a big waste of money. So if you have property rights, so people can have the exclusive use of their own property, which includes the right to buy it or sell it, they'll be much more secure in the stuff they have, so they'll be more willing to try to create wealth, to try to create products and then sell them, because they know that they retain the benefit. So the enforcement of contracts and the enforcement of property rights are essential roles of government in order for a market economy to function. And without them, you cannot have a market economy function. And if you want transactions across time, so I don't know, if you buy like a stock or a bond, if you buy a car with a loan or a house with a loan, these are critical for those transactions to be able to take place. You can't trust the person's going to pay you back. You're not going to lend them money. If you can't borrow money, you have to spend 20 years to save up for a house instead of buying a house up front and paying it off over 20 years. And we can talk about independent court system is critical for this. So having an independent judiciary that's not controlled by like the whims of politicians is essential. Do you guys have any questions about what we covered today?